Okay, so in this session, we're going to be looking at Adobe Creative Cloud as a holistic software ecosystem. Um, and the great thing about it is that a lot of Adobe apps work really nicely together as a whole, a bit like the Microsoft 365 software ecosystem. And this is part of a wider trend in software that we've seen over the past kind of 10, 15 years or so. But before we go any further, we'll have a look at some learning objectives. So by the end of this session today, you'll hopefully be able to understand the concept of cloud computing in a specific context, that context today being Adobe Creative Cloud. You'll have a knowledge of Adobe applications and the ecosystem as a whole, and hopefully be able to consider the pros and cons of using cloud-based Adobe apps. So, are you familiar with the idea of cloud computing and what that means?
No.
No. Okay, that's absolutely fine because I've got a definition. So cloud computing this is from IBM. IBM is a tech company, so this definition is reliable. Cloud computing is the on-demand access of computing resources, physical or virtual servers, data storage, network capabilities, application development tools, software, AI-powered analytic tools, and more over the internet with pay-per-user pricing. So what that means is that you can access services on your computer via the internet, essentially,
Okay.
on demand as and when you need them. And this is kind of a shift from how things worked um, a few years ago. I'm not sure how old you are, but when I was at school, everything was, I suppose, devolved to individual institutions. So different organizations would have their own infrastructure and servers that they would then have to manage in-house and employ staff in-house in order to manage that infrastructure. Whereas cloud computing, there is a much bigger emphasis on a larger centralization, I suppose, of this support. So rather than having your in-house servers in a little room tucked away in a little cupboard, you can offload that work into a data center that is managed by a much bigger company that you then pay for to look after that physical infrastructure, or rather that you pay for access to that infrastructure offsite, and you only pay for the amount that you use. So let's think about a specific example of this. So how does cloud computing differ from traditional or local computing? So a really easy example of this is the idea of storage. So everybody these days uses cloud storage, whether it's on your phone to save your pictures. So if you're on an iPhone, you might pay for iCloud. If you're on an Android phone, you might pay for Google Photos. And the idea is that those photos, those files, are not saved on the built-in hardware of your device. They're actually saved on a cloud server somewhere, and you access those on demand through an app, either via a web browser or via a specific app on your phone. You've also got this shift um, from a licensing perspective. 15 years ago, you would pay for what was called a perpetual license for a piece of software. You'd pay a one-off fee and you would have access to that software indefinitely. And things no longer work like that. Especially with Adobe, they moved to a software as a service model where you pay a monthly subscription to access their tools and software. And so that is a movement from software as a product, you pay a one-time fee and you have access indefinitely, to a software as a service model where you pay a monthly subscription to continue your access to that software. And it has pros and cons.
Okay.
Because if you're paying a subscription model, then yes, it works out as more expensive, but you get ongoing support indefinitely. Whereas with the previous model, which was product-based, you would pay your one-off fee and you would have a limited amount of support, normally until the next iteration of the software came out.
Yeah.
You also have the benefit of just paying for what you need. So, you can stop your subscription at any time. Whereas if you paid for your software as a product, then you're kind of lumped with it. You're stuck with it indefinitely, which, you might just want to use it for one quick job that you have to do, like editing a photo or editing a video, and you just need to use it for this one time. So rather than paying, £1,000 for a huge software package, you can just pay for a month's access for £50, let's say, and you can use it for that month and complete the task that you need to do. Another big benefit of cloud services is the ability to offload computer-intensive tasks. So this is particularly pertinent with AI. So rather than needing to have a specific level of hardware in your computer, maybe you can't afford it for whatever reason, or maybe you're working with a slightly older machine, you can still use these quite computer resource intensive applications and services, but rather than the processing being done on your computer locally, some of that processing is done in the cloud. And in Photoshop, for example, if you're using some of the more intensive generative AI tools, you can actually select whether or not the processing of that is done in the app on your device, or it is offloaded onto a server somewhere. So you've got that benefit that perhaps your computer isn't quite up to the task of doing these really resource-intensive processes and operations, so you have the opportunity to offload some of that into the cloud. I see somebody else has joined us. Welcome. I'm just kind of going through some slides explaining the benefits of cloud computing services versus older product-based services. So, is everybody okay with what I've said so far? I think somebody is walking past my window. So, what we'll do is we'll have a look at some of these cloud services in action, specifically with regard to Adobe. Now, you might not have all of the apps installed, and that's fine because, like I said at the start of the session, this is going to be more of a demonstration rather than a hands-on workshop. But this is being recorded so you can access this later if you want to give these things a go yourself. So I'm on a Mac, but this is very similar to how this works on a Windows PC. And you can see here that I've got the Adobe Creative Cloud application open. And that is this one with the kind of rainbow gradient. And when you download an Adobe app, it downloads this management tool alongside. And this is where you install and manage all of the Adobe apps that are on your device. If I click on Files, I can actually access all of my Adobe Cloud storage, okay? And this is linked to, so this is a piece of cloud storage that all students and staff have access to through the Adobe Creative Campus partnership. You get 100 gigabytes of cloud storage within Adobe. And you can see this is just listed in my files, but I actually can click on your libraries. And it's just going to take a little bit of time. And you can see I've got a bunch of other stuff here as well. And what's great is that I can actually access all of this content, all of these libraries within Adobe's apps themselves. So if I just open Adobe Illustrator, and if I create a new file just very quickly, I can actually open the libraries panel over here. Sometimes you'll have to go to Window and make sure you've got a tick next to the libraries. And I can view all of these files directly in the app. So if I go back to here, I actually have a library dedicated to Goldsmiths content that I've shared with my colleagues. And if I click on Goldsmiths, I've got access to the logos that I can just drag straight in. It needs to be updated. You can see it looks a bit messed up. But I've also got color schemes associated with Goldsmiths, fonts, particular images that I might want to use. You can see that's absolutely enormous, but I can resize that down quickly. So it becomes really, really quick and easy to share particularly branded content like this. And of course, you can set up a huge number of libraries for whatever purposes you have. You can see I've got things set up for specific workshops that I give, and I've even got access to libraries that other people have shared with me. And an example of that is the Creative Campus library. So colleagues at Adobe have shared this with me with content that they've created that I can then add in to things that I create. And that doesn't just go for Illustrator. I can do the same in Photoshop. So again, same process. I'll just open, oh, I won't open that one. I'll just create a new file quickly. I can go to my libraries. Need to open the panel, and you can see it looks exactly the same. But it doesn't just apply to applications that you download for your desktop. It also applies to web applications as well. So I'll just open a new window. Are you all familiar with Adobe Express?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I just open Adobe Express, I can then access all of that same content directly in Express. But in Express, it's split into stuff that I've created, and I've also got brands as well. So sometimes it might be set out in a slightly different way than you imagine. And then another aspect is Adobe's additional kind of services and apps. So for example, Adobe Color, which is a web application for creating color themes for your projects, has got a library tab as well. And you can see, again, I can access all of these. So not all of them have got color schemes, but I've got this color scheme under Goldsmiths. I've got this color scheme under a community project that I do work for. And if I just wanted to create my own color scheme, I can do that. And then I can save it to one of my libraries that I've got set up. Or I can press the plus to create a new library. So that's one of these great benefits of using cloud-based computer services, is that you've kind of got this seamless integration across all of these different applications. So I don't have to worry about exporting an image from Photoshop and then re-importing it into something else. I can really quickly work across all of the apps, both desktop versions and things on the web, seamlessly, and I can then share that content with my colleagues who might be working on, a shared poster design or a social media campaign. It just becomes really, really easy. And one really good use case is if you create a piece of social media content within Illustrator or within Photoshop, you can then just pull it straight into Adobe Express. Let me just open Express over here, and then I can use the scheduling tool to post it directly on social media. So if I've got all of my social media connections set up within Express, I do another workshop on how to do this. So if you're interested in this aspect, come to that and I can talk you through it. The great thing about that is that I don't need to then have all of my tabs for my different social media platforms open. I can just have everything integrated into this one application and then pick where it gets posted to. So it's this really seamless experience across all of the apps, which 15 years ago, if we were using Adobe Creative Suite, as it was called, you would have to export everything and then upload it to a web browser, and it would be a really time-consuming process. So that gives you an overview of how these apps work together.
So for starting off, we have to build a library first.
You don't have to build a library. It's much like keeping your files organized on your hard drive,
Okay.
in folders. If you're working on multiple projects like I do, then it's a good idea to have libraries set up. Otherwise, you're going to get confused. Things are going to go missing. So I'd say it's good practice to use libraries, but it's not essential. And you can create those libraries in whichever app you're working in, and it'll sync across all of the apps. So you don't have to start creating your library in the Creative Cloud app. I don't think I've ever created a library in here. I've created all of these libraries in other applications. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Perfect. So another huge benefit of this kind of cloud-based system is that you can actually create when you share content between apps, it will dynamically update, which is a really, really useful feature. So I'll show you this in action. I'm just going to close Illustrator because my computer is becoming a little bit sticky. So what I've got open is this logo. I'll just close that. That I've created for a made-up society at Goldsmiths. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to also open Adobe InDesign because I want to make a poster for an upcoming event. Okay, so create a new project in InDesign as well. Now, hopefully my computer doesn't give up because I've got a lot of apps open here. So I just create this new document, and I do a workshop dedicated to InDesign. If you'd like to come along to that. What I can do is if I create a new library, and I'll call this Goldsmiths Cat Appreciation. I've created a new library in Illustrator. I can actually just drag and drop this from Illustrator straight in to the library over here. And I can rename that. So I'll call this logo. And then I can come over to InDesign. I can find that library. And I can just drop it straight in. Okay. And I know that this is some library content because I've got this little icon up here at the top. Okay. Now, let's imagine that I've got all of these posters. Let me just resize this so that it fits on the screen. Um, fitting. Now imagine I've got, this logo featured on loads of different posters, but actually somebody decides that they don't like the font or the color of this logo. So what I can do is I can go back to my original in Illustrator and I can change my font. Let me do that. Let me pick something really quickly. Okay. Can't remember which one it was. Let's go for that one, I think. Antique. Antique. There we are. So I've updated this. Okay. If I go back to my Libraries tab, oops, wrong thing. I shouldn't have done it on the original. I needed to open it and do edit. But same principle applies. I'll just select this, change the font, like that. Okay. And if I go back to InDesign, might have to do a little bit of refreshing. Hold on. Back to Illustrator, back to Libraries. Do save. Updates here. And you can see I have had to do nothing in InDesign and it's updated over here. And if I'm in Adobe Express, perhaps I'm doing something for social media, I can find that same thing. It's got this little chain link icon, meaning it's linked to something. And then I can go in to my original, change the font again. Actually, no, let's not change the font. Let's change the color. So let's decide that we want this to be blue, perhaps. Blue. Blue. We want this to be like that. I can get rid of this like that. Or maybe actually, just to make it stand out a little bit, we can do a bit like that. Oops. It's not white, is it? Okay, so we've got a bit of this. And then same again, I just go File and Save. And it updates here. Go back to InDesign. Updates automatically. And I go to Express. And I get this little notification that my assets have changed. Press Update. It takes a little bit of time. You saw the little icon. And voila, we've got that updated logo. And the same would go if I'd shared this with people and they've then placed that logo, but then it needs to change. We can do that. It will update for them because I've changed it. And you can also do the same with images in Photoshop. So I come back to Photoshop. If I open this, for example, I can add this to my library. Perhaps I want to do, where is my cat? Goldsmiths. Okay. I can just press add. It's doing something. Not sure why it's added that color, but I will remove it. It's thinking about it. I've got a lot of things running at the moment, so it's probably just having a bit of difficulty uploading to the cloud. There we are, so I can see it. And then I can place that in my InDesign document. You can see it's already there for me to pop in. I'll just zoom over to it just so we can see the cat. I'm going to pop it into my InDesign, into my Express project as well. And if I come back to my Photoshop, right click and edit, just like before. And perhaps I want to just remove the background. Okay, I save, get the update here. Again, it's thinking about it. Okay, go back to InDesign. It's updated here. Link assets have changed. Press update. There we are. All done. So just to give you so hopefully you've got an idea now of how these apps all work together across the cloud. And it just makes, the creation of content, especially if you're collaborating with people, really, really easy. Does anybody have any questions about what I've gone through so far?
No.
No, that's fine. I'm just going to check that there's nothing in the chat. Okay, if we go back to so what I would encourage you to do is have a go with using the Adobe Cloud libraries, the Adobe Creative Cloud libraries, because it is super useful. And it's not perfect. You can see that they look very different in the app compared to here. And if I go to Express and have a look in here, It looks very different. You've kind of got this libraries thing, but then you've also got this brands thing. And if you're looking at this in a desktop app, then they're all lumped together. It can kind of take a bit of time to get your head around, but you're only going to be able to do that if you actually have a go at creating these different libraries. And if you come to an Adobe Express session, we'll go through how to create a brand and what benefits that kind of gives to you and your collaborators. So that kind of concludes the, I guess, the demonstration part of the session. Please do go back and review the footage to have a go. But I have some questions for you now. So which Adobe applications do you use and how do they benefit your work and study habits? Thinking specifically about this idea of the cloud service. You can put something in the chat or you can say to your microphone, take that off mute, just to give me an idea.
Like you meant, what apps do we use for
Yeah,
our...
so what apps do you use already? And based on what I've gone through today, how do you think you can utilize the kind of cloud services that we've gone through?
Okay, for my earlier projects, I have been using Canva.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, because I didn't have any knowledge about Adobe.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday I also had a session with you with Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that for my future projects, I can use Photoshops and other Adobe platforms
Mm-hmm.
for creating content and posters for making a portfolio.
Oh, okay, nice,
Yeah.
yes. What you'll find if you've used Canva before is that Adobe Express is actually very similar. So, I think you'll easily be able to move over to Adobe Express if you want to. And if you use your Goldsmiths login to log in to Express, you'll have access to some premium content and also all of the generative AI features, which you might find very, very useful.
Yeah, I'll just play around with Adobe Express. I haven't used it right now, so I'm a little struggling with it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just trying to think if I just quickly have a look at the next Adobe Express workshop. Just bear with me. Um, the next Adobe Express workshop is. You just missed one last week. I'm not sure when the next one will be. Adobe Express for infographics. So you might find that helpful. I'm not sure why it's got online and a location. I'll double check. I can't remember if it's online or in person, but you might find that useful because we'll be going through kind of the basics of setting up something and bringing content in. So that's on the 5th of March. So yes, I would definitely suggest coming along to that if you're a bit stuck with Express. At some point in the future, I'll also be uploading some content onto YouTube, which will be available via the library web pages. So do have a look for that. What about you, Muskan? Anything? Anything that you think you're going to take away from today? With respect to kind of using these cloud services, or maybe you already use some Adobe apps. No pressure. I can move on if you would rather not speak. That's absolutely fine. Okay, I'll move on. So what about some downsides to working in this way? This is again kind of an open discussion. What are some negatives about working with a cloud-based service like Adobe?
I think it can be overwhelming sometimes if you are not organized,
Yes,
because as
absolutely.
yeah, as you said, in library all the things can be messed up if you're not organized. So yeah, I think that would be an issue.
It's kind of a it takes a particular way of thinking, doesn't it? And as well, you have to consider, what your projects are going to look like in the future. It's like, okay, well, am I going to need to share this with anybody? Is anybody else going to need access to this? So do I need to save it to the cloud, or can I just save it on my own device?
Yeah,
Um, yeah, so of course you can always change that later. That's the beauty of working digitally. Very rarely are things kind of set in stone. You can always make changes later. Anything else? Any other concerns that you might have?
not right now.
Not right
I
now?
might
No?
face later.
That's fine. Um, I think one thing to always consider is the reliability of your internet connection. um, Especially if you're working collaboratively or if you're, working remotely or you travel a lot and you need to access these assets. You need to have a good internet connection. I mean, you saw how long it took me on Goldsmith's internet, which notoriously is not the best, um, to upload just one simple image. If I was uploading lots of Photoshop files, that could take time. And then it means my collaborator, who could be working on the other side of the world, it's going to take them time to update.
Yeah,
Um, so, it's not always perfectly real time. You might need to allow a little bit of leeway for that. Um, and, some places simply don't have a reliable internet connection.
yeah,
Um, I think it's important to remember that the service is costly. We're very lucky at Goldsmiths that we do have this partnership with Adobe, so students don't have to pay for it, and it saves about 600, £700 a year for students. Um, so it's a big saving, but once you leave, you know, um, you then are going to have to start paying for it, and it is expensive. Um, which brings me on to the next point about Adobe's market dominance in a lot of industries. Um, things like Illustrator, Photoshop are the industry standard, and there are very few alternatives. Um, and one of the benefits for Adobe of providing um, Creative Cloud to students through an institutional partnership with a university is that it's a bit like a gateway drug. Students get inducted early into using these apps, and they then maybe don't feel obliged, but because they've received training in the apps, and it's drilled into them that they are the industry standard, that they're more likely to then pay for it once they graduate and move into working in the industry. Um, what have we got next? Yeah, so a few years ago, I think it was 2023, Adobe tried to take over Figma. I don't know if you're familiar with Figma. Um,
yeah.
it's a um, user experience, user interface. I can't remember. Um, User interface, I think. Web application, and they had agreed a £20 billion acquisition. So that's a lot of money. Um, but then the European Union said no, because Adobe already has such market dominance in the world of digital design that it would create an unfair monopoly. So that's just an example there of Adobe's market dominance, that it's so dominant in this market that government regulators have said this actually can't go ahead. And once the acquisition deal had been abandoned, Adobe's stock price plummeted. and I'm not actually sure if it's recovered. And then just finally, so this is how much it costs for the full package of Adobe Creative Cloud. So you get 3 months at a reduced price. You can get a student discount if you're not part of a creative campus, and that's significantly cheaper. But of course, that's only for a limited time. Full price, it's nearly £57 a month, which equates to £684 per year, which over the space of 3 years is over £2,000. So it is expensive. And if you compare that, and you have to continue paying for it, and then if you want things like Adobe Stock, so Adobe's library of stock images and video and content, that is an additional fee on top of that. And if you compare that to the last version of Adobe software that was available as a perpetual license, which was back in 2013, that cost £1,300, and you'd have indefinite access. You would install that, you would get a license key, and you would have access to that software indefinitely. But of course, you don't have then access to the ongoing support. And after a while, operating systems are updated, security things are updated, and it means that that piece of software is no longer compatible with the operating system or security software that you might be running on your device. So it's a bit of a, I guess, a double-edged sword in that regard. Okay, so that's the end. Does anybody have any questions about what we've been through today? Please feel free to pop in the chat or ask out loud.
I don't have any questions.
No questions? I'll pop my email address in the chat. If you do have any questions that you think of after this session, please feel free to email me. I've got a short workshop evaluation survey, and I'd be very grateful if you could fill that out. I'll pop the link to that in the chat as well. I'm just going to double check that it's got, just because I did this before Christmas, and I can't remember if I've popped this workshop onto that form. So if you just bear with me for 2 minutes, I'll just double check. Perfect, it is on the list. Right. So yeah, so that's it for today. Please please do fill out the evaluation survey. It just makes me, it enables me to improve on these sessions in future. If you'd like to know more about any of the Adobe applications, you can sign up to a dedicated workshop that I run throughout the term. Those are both online and in person. So next week I've got Adobe Premiere Pro, an introduction to, which is our video editing software. The following week I think we've got Adobe Illustrator or Adobe InDesign, and then the following week it'll be the other one of those. And then in the second half of the term, there are more advanced sessions if you'd like to continue to build on those skills that you develop in the first half of the term. So thank you for coming, and I hopefully will see you at some other workshops in the future.